Hello, I'm Dr. Marilyn Bull, a neurodevelopmental pediatrician at Riley Hospital for Children at IU Health in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's my pleasure to be your moderator today for this very important topic. Is it okay to be little? Is it okay to be big? And how can you be sure I'm safe? And how can we engage nurses to help us with this process? Our first speaker today is Dr. Natalie Davis, a neonatologist at the University of Maryland School of Medicine in Baltimore. Dr. Davis attended the University of Michigan as part of the Interflex combined undergraduate and medical school program and completed her pediatric residency and chief residency at the University of California, San Francisco. She then did a fellowship in neonatology at Boston Children's Hospital while earning a master's in medical science through the Scholars in Clinical Science program at Harvard Medical School. She is involved in numerous research projects related to the discharge readiness of vulnerable infants and low birth weight and preterm. Our next speaker will be Michelle Chapello. She is a RN, BSN, and CPST instructor at the Child Passenger Safety Coordinator at Riley Hospital for Children at IU Health. She received her bachelor's in nursing at Indiana University, has been a pediatric nurse at Riley Hospital for 38 years. She started the hospital-based child passenger safety program in 2004, which provides car seats and education on proper use to parents and their siblings, as well as children in the community. She oversees 120 certified child passenger safety technicians and teaches the National Child Passenger Safety Certification Training Program, as well as the Safe Travel for All Children Special Needs curriculum. She has trained over 600 technicians and numerous instructors, and she's the co-chairperson for the Injury-Free Coalition of Kids Child Passenger Safety Committee. Her talk will talk about the engagement of nursing in child passenger safety. And then our third speaker is Shane Merritt, who has a bachelor's in mechanical engineering and a master's in business administration. He worked as a project engineer in the automotive and nuclear industries. He was a design engineer for Britax Child Safety and director of the automotive safety program at Riley for Children. He's currently president of Merritt Manufacturing, which designs and manufactures child safety seats for children with special health care needs. I'm going to turn it over to our illustrious speakers, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy their presentations.
So I'd like to thank Dr. Bull for that kind introduction. And like she said, I am one of the neonatologists, so that means I am a pediatrician who specializes in taking care of small, sick, and premature infants. My area of research and clinical interest is trying to figure out how we get babies safely home, getting them ready for discharge. And so this is a very important topic to me. So the title of my talk is it okay to be little? How can you be sure I am safe? My disclosures, I have no financial relationships or conflicts of interest to resolve. The discussion of any specific car seat or brand is purely informative, not meant as an endorsement of that brand. And this presentation will not discuss unapproved or off-label uses. So first, I think it's important to take a step back and figure out when a baby is ready for discharge. And to have an idea of the scope of the issue, 10% of babies in the US are born prematurely each year. So there's a significant number of babies that are born small and at high risk for breathing problems. And with advances in medical technology and neonatal care, we have sicker and smaller babies that are surviving to discharge. Babies born as low as a pound or less, and babies that are between 16 and 17 weeks before their due date are surviving and getting ready to go home. And they're going home at smaller weights and lower corrected gestational ages, which is fantastic, and we're so excited about this, but does pose a problem when we're trying to get them safely home. Because how do we send premature babies home? In car seats, of course, ideally, so in some sort of approved car safety device. However, we know car seats are challenging to find for our smallest patients for a variety of different reasons, and two major ones stand out to me. One is proper fit. We know that preterm, low birth weight infants often fit poorly in standard car seats. This is because of their small size. They also have low tone and low strength, They can easily be malpositioned and they don't have the strength to correct themselves. They can slouch more easily. The straps can hit them at abnormal places. So they are a more complex patient to fit in a car seat. And here are a couple of examples. So the baby on the left is a small baby. So it appears properly positioned, but you can see that baby's very small in that car seat, so easy to move around. The baby on the right, you can see the head is flopped over to the side. Preterm and small babies often have poor tone, and their head can flop forward more easily, occluding their airway, making it difficult for them to breathe. And they also have poor strength, so it's hard for them to correct themselves and correct their airway. So both of these things put them at higher risk while in the car seat. So how do we ensure safe fit for small babies? Well, first, it's important to note that all infants, regardless of size, must travel in a child restraint system that meets requirements set by the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 213, regardless of whether it's a car seat or a car bed. Initially, rear-facing car seats were designated by manufacturers for use by infants generally weighing more than 5 pounds. With advancing medical technology, as I noted, we're saving smaller and sicker babies, and they're frequently smaller than this by the time they're ready for discharge. So we know preterm infants are very often less than 5 pounds at discharge. And there's no specific minimum weight for discharge per the American Academy of Pediatrics. However, the caveat being this may differ at your hospital, so be sure to check with your specific policies. But in general, for the AAP, we realized that infants didn't follow guidelines as far as weight. They often were more immature and more than 5 pounds, or less immature at less than 5 pounds. So right now, to figure out when a baby is safe for discharge, instead of picking an arbitrary weight, we use these maturity criteria. So they have to demonstrate safe breathing, enough oral intake to gain weight, and normal temperatures in their crib. And this frequently is at less than 5 pounds, which poses a problem if most of the car seats are made for bigger babies. So it's important when you're thinking of premature babies or low birth weight babies to really consider what their discharge weight is going to be. If you're able to meet with families ahead of time and identify that they may be delivering a small baby, they're anticipating a preterm baby or a baby with medical issues, really being able to advise them before they're by their car seat is ideal. Or if there's a family that's in the neonatal ICU or the nursery, that you can advise them before they get their car seat, saves them a lot of hassle. So what about those babies that are closer to 4 pounds at discharge, so 4 or more pounds? How do we find a safe car seat for those babies? I recommend using the healthychildren.org website. They have a fantastic car safety seat product list that has more than 50 different varieties that I counted that were approved down to at least 4 pounds. And they've listed the manufacturer, the minimum and maximum weight at a variety of different price points to help educate our families to make sure that they're choosing a safe small car seat for their babies. What about that rare time when babies are ready for discharge at less than 4 pounds? So it doesn't happen frequently, but happens frequently enough to really cause a lot of concern and issues. So the different options include waiting until the baby's 4 pounds for discharge, but if the baby's meeting those maturity criteria, that's challenging to do in the NICU. Another option that hospitals think about are car beds, and we'll talk a little bit more about those. However, it is important to note that there are a few, although rare, varieties of semi-upright car seats that are approved less than 4 pounds. So again, not as an endorsement of these brands, but just to inform everyone that there are a few of these seats. So the top brand has 2 car seats that are approved down to birth or down to 3 pounds. And the second brand is a car seat that was on the market approved to 4 pounds and recently was approved down to 3 pounds. So we do have some options for that rare baby who's mature and ready to go home before 4 pounds. So what about car beds? Car beds are safety devices that allow flat travel, either prone or laying flat on their belly or supine laying flat on their back. It's important to note that the car beds on the market do meet Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards as appropriate. This often comes up and there's a concern that they do not meet these standards. However, they do. And these are appropriate if there's a medical need for the small baby to lay flat. So a variety of different issues can come up in preterm and small babies, including neurologic issues, spinal issues, joint issues, breathing issues, airway issues that necessitate for safety that they lay flat for travel. This is when a car bed is the ideal positioning device. However, if a baby can tolerate the semi-upright position, they really should ride in a rear-facing car seat. And I don't recommend just discharging a small baby who can otherwise medically tolerate a car seat in a car bed. A number of institutions, if they have babies at 4 pounds or less, will automatically think of a car bed. However, if there's a way to get them in a car seat safely, that's ideal for a variety of different reasons. The car beds are definitely more cumbersome, although they are safe. But the biggest challenge is figuring out after discharge how to safely transition a baby from a car bed back into a car seat. If we feel a baby is not safe to breathe in a car seat because of their size or medical issues, you don't want to arbitrarily transition them from a car bed back to a car seat as an outpatient without future planning, which can definitely get complex. So ideally, if there isn't a medical need, trying to find an appropriately sized car seat. And if you're thinking about car beds in those medically fragile infants, really want to check the minimum weight as well. So there are a number of car beds that are approved and out on the market. However, the first two are approved down to 5 pounds and the second one approved down to 4.5 pounds. So if you're thinking of this for a small baby, those would not necessarily meet those babies who are 4 pounds or less. There is one car bed that's approved 4 pounds or less on the market that's approved up to 9 pounds. So definitely for small babies, recently transitioned manufacturers. So they are available if there's a medical need, but again, make sure you're putting the baby in the appropriate sized car bed. So we talked a bit about proper fit. The second concern I have about car seats for our smallest patients is safe breathing. So we want to make sure they fit properly because we know that babies are at risk for breathing problems in the semi-upright position. We've either seen on the news or heard stories or worked with families ourselves who've had babies who've had breathing problems in the car seat. And the most concerning is those babies who've had sudden and unexplained infant death. So studies have shown that SIDS deaths or sudden infant death syndrome with no other known extrinsic risk factors such as sleeping prone, bed sharing, soft bedding, or having their head covered, found over a quarter had been put to sleep in the semi-upright position. And another study evaluating infant deaths in sitting devices found that 63% occurred in car seats. So although car seats are absolutely necessary for travel and absolutely life-saving in this age group, they can also be risky for breathing and why we need to evaluate babies before they go home. And this is where the car seat tolerance screen comes into play. This is a test that is performed on infants in hospital that has been recommended since the 1990s by the American Academy of Pediatrics. It is a period of observation in the car seat prior to discharge to monitor for breathing pauses, oxygen drops, heart rate drops, and unsafe breathing. It's currently recommended for infants born prematurely or less than 37 weeks, and many hospitals also include infants with low birth weight and other medical high-risk conditions such as low tone, heart problems, and breathing problems. And the current recommendation is to test for 90 to 120 minutes or the duration of the car ride home, whichever is longer. However, this test is controversial because there are no specific recommendations for failure criteria. So the specific low heart rate, the specific low oxygen level that constitutes a failure is not standardized across the US. And that leads to problems because we're often providing different care to babies, not based on their medical conditions, but based on the hospitals from which they're discharged. For example, this is a figure from a study that I recently did with my group where we contacted almost 200 NICUs across the nation to get an idea of what failure criteria they're using. And you can see on the x-axis, the failure criteria for oxygen level ranged from less than 80% all the way to less than 92%. The y-axis gives you the percentage of NICUs that answered each of these numbers, and the patterns give you the duration of time an infant had to spend below that level to constitute a failure. So for example, this baby. Say this baby dropped to 86% for 25 seconds. At this first block of hospitals, that baby would fail because at those hospitals, a baby had to drop below 90% for longer than 20 seconds to fail their car seat tolerance screen. At the second block of hospitals, that same baby would pass because at those hospitals, a baby has to drop below 85% for longer than 30 seconds to fail their car seat test. You can see one hospital deems these vitals safe, another hospital deems these vitals unsafe. And this is very challenging, again, because we're providing different care based on the hospital, not on the baby. So the suggested failure criteria from my group, these are not specifically from the AAP, this is just from my research, is apnea longer than 20 seconds or breathing pause, a heart rate below 80 for longer than 10 seconds, an oxygen level below 90 for longer than 10 seconds, or any sort of breathing distress that's not improved with proper positioning. Using these criteria because they are the most common listed by NICUs in previous studies as well as nurseries is sort of a potential first step to try to standardize this so we can better research and see, are we using the right criteria? Are we making sure that babies are safe? The reason it's important for us to standardize is, for example, the Canadian Pediatrics Society, as of 2016, no longer recommends routine car seat tolerance screens. And they note this is because of the lack of long-term data on infants, the lack of data that says that long-term car seat tests help protect infants. And it's true, we really are lacking that information. So coming up with standard criteria and moving forward would help us better define what's safe for our infants. So one of the things I wanted to end with are some frequently asked questions. So questions I get from nurses, from techs, from everyone across the nation that they run into when discussing car seat safety and car seat tolerance screens with families and with hospitals. The first one is the medical team doesn't want to perform a car seat tolerance screen. Is it really necessary? Canada stop doing them. The information I like to put out is what literature is out there. What information do we have? So it's still right now the standard of care for preterm infants in the US. And in fact, as of a 2020 study, over 96% of NICUs report that they do perform a car seat tolerance screen. Studies have shown since the 1980s that between 5 and 25% of neonates will fail a car seat tolerance screen prior to discharge. A 2018 study of car seat tolerance screens in NICU patients found that although those who failed had longer lengths of stay in the hospital, they also were significantly less likely to be readmitted within 30 days. Potentially indicating that although babies that fail their car seat test stay in the hospital a little bit longer, they're able to identify problems, reposition, find a car seat that fits them, identify some sort of underlying medical issue that we're able to take care of, thereby potentially sending them home safer, so they're less likely to have issues after they go home. A 2017 study that focused just on babies who were born and admitted to the nursery who failed their car seat test and were therefore automatically admitted to the NICU for a period of monitoring found that almost 40% had ongoing breathing pauses or apnea. And a 2020 study looking at late preterm infants born between 34 and 36 weeks gestation found that over 20% who failed more than one car seat tolerance screen from the nursery ultimately required NICU admission for low oxygen levels. And of those, 2/3 required oxygen for safe discharge home. So it does seem to indicate that infants who fail their car seat test, there's something going on with them, and that potentially identifying these issues helps us intervene, decrease their risk of readmission, and those infants that fail multiple car seat tests often have some sort of underlying medical condition that needs extra oxygen or extra attention for discharge safely home. And the American Academy of Pediatrics, and specifically the committee that focuses on newborn babies called the Committee on Fetus and Newborn, notes that infants are not safe for hospital discharge until physiologically mature and stable cardiorespiratory function has been documented for a sufficient duration. And I would argue this must apply not only while laying supine or on their back in the crib, but also while semi-upright in their car seat. So how about the family that declines the car seat tolerance screen? They say, we don't have a car, why do we have to do this? What I say is it's definitely not the law, but it's definitely a recommendation right now by the AAP to ensure babies are breathing safely. I discussed the similar risks that apply to the semi-upright position in bouncy seats, rockers, slings, swings, etc. And I know they may ride in a car at some point in the upcoming months, and the family might want to be able to better identify safety. So how about when the NICU team maybe wants to test for a shorter duration? They say if the ride home is only 30 minutes, why do we have to test for 90 to 120? To that, I say travel may take longer due to unforeseen circumstances, including weather, traffic, etc. So it's important to be safe. And as I noted above, this risk applies to all semi-upright positions that an infant might be in. And the AAP currently recommends 90 to 120 minutes or the duration of the car ride home, whichever is longer. So that is currently the standard of care. And as of a 2020 study, 85% of NICUs do follow these guidelines. So again, that is the most common use. And finally, I like to kind of argue for the benefit of having certified child passenger safety technicians available in and out of the hospital and pediatric programs. So a hospital might say, we don't need any more or any techs. It is a potential cost. It is, challenging in this time. However, I think using the data to point out the benefits is really important. So a recent study that I mentioned before noted that 63% of infant deaths in sitting devices were in car seats. But what I hadn't pointed out was in these cases, fewer than 10% were being used as directed. A 2016 study came out that demonstrated that 86% of families made an error in infant positioning in the car seat at the time of discharge. However, those families who worked with a tech prior to delivery had 1/10 the odds of misuse compared to those families who did not have access to technicians. So involvement of child passenger safety technicians for staff and caregiver education could decrease the number of infants who have unstable breathing status in the car seat due to improper positioning or poor fit. So I think this really emphasizes the importance of having trained people in the hospital to help with caregivers, to help with staff, and to really help keep our patients safe. So with that, I want to thank this conference and thank everyone for listening and giving me the opportunity to talk to you. I'm excited about this group of people that's really dedicated to taking care of children, especially babies, and I wish everyone luck.
Okay, I'd like to thank Dr. Bull for that introduction, and following up on Dr. Brown's presentation, I'd like to talk about nurses and them being a front line to child passenger safety. Before I do so, it is important to discuss what child passenger safety programs need to support nurses and others trained in child passenger safety. I will refer to nurses quite a bit throughout this presentation because the majority of the healthcare providers in our hospital and our program here at Riley are nurses, but this presentation can apply to anyone trained in child passenger safety. So nurses or other child passenger safety technicians have the opportunity to make a big impact in the lives of children by teaching their parents how to best care for them and keep them safe. Keeping them safe when traveling is just one important way nurses and other technicians can make a big difference in the lives of their patients. But in order to be successful, nurses need the support of the leadership where they are practicing. Administrators must fully support and understand the need for a child passenger safety program for it to be successful. At Riley Hospital, we are very fortunate that we have Dr. Paul Hout, the COO, and Dr. Liz Linden, the CNO, who both strongly support our child passenger safety program. For any program to be successful, there needs to be someone responsible for the day-to-day operations of the program. And for us, that is me, the child passenger safety coordinator for the hospitals. The program coordinator needs to be someone having both experience with children and child passenger safety. In a pediatric hospital, oftentimes this person is a nurse, but it is not always necessary. The coordinator is responsible for the development and the ongoing maintenance of the program. Nurses and other healthcare providers must receive proper training and ongoing education in child passenger safety to maintain their competency level based on the best practice recommendations of the American Academy of Pediatrics and of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Nurses must be supported and have mentors that they can rely on when issues arise which they are not qualified to handle. Administrators can influence others to support the program. They can do this by providing funding sources, identifying physicians and other multidisciplinary team members to be involved in the program. Nurses trained in child passenger safety will benefit from the support of the hospital administrators and the physicians. At Riley Hospital, I am fortunate to have the leadership and medical expertise of Dr. Marilyn Bull and Dr. Joe O'Neill, co-medical directors of the state's automotive safety program at IU School of Medicine and Riley Hospital for Children at IU Health. As a program coordinator with child passenger safety experience, one should be responsible for building the multidisciplinary team, developing policies and training materials, teaching and mentoring nurses and other healthcare providers, and developing an outreach program for families in the community. They should maintain up-to-date policies based on best practice standards that are current from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the AAP. It is important to develop policies that fit the specific institution instead of using a standardized policy available through vendors that may not demonstrate best practice standards. So it's important to develop the policy and make sure that you can meet the standards that you've demonstrated and put in your policy. The coordinator is also responsible for training staff members and standardizing documentation, which will thereby reduce liability concerns. The coordinator should evaluate the program to determine its success and ways to improve the program based on programming goals. The coordinator has a vital role in supporting the nurses trained in child passenger safety. Why should nurses become trained in child passenger safety? Well, we heard about some reasons earlier, but if an infant survives their first year of life, he or she is more likely to die from injuries sustained in a car crash than anything else until they're about 24 years old from the National Safety Council. Nurses have the opportunity to teach the parents of the most fragile newborns, hospitalized children, children with special transportation needs related to their medical condition, children that have been injured in a motor vehicle crash, and healthy infants and children. Teaching can be provided in many different locations. They can be provided at doctor appointments, during child visits. They can also be provided during prenatal classes, at home care visits, community events, health fairs, while the child is hospitalized when ill, at car seat clinics, and numerous other places. Nurses have many opportunities to make sure that parents have the training needed to safely transport their children and can oftentimes provide a safe car seat at a reduced cost for free for parents that qualify for programs for low-income families. I'd also like to just say that there are a lot of grants and donations available that the coordinator can apply for, and that can help or not either help or completely support the free car seats that they provide to the families at their hospital, along with the patient's siblings and, as I said earlier, children in the community. So if you're a patient care coordinator at a hospital and you're developing a child passenger safety program, it's important to think about how you go about selecting nurses and other professionals to be trained in child passenger safety. It's important to choose the right people to receive the training, and I would always recommend that you don't have people that are voluntold to attend the child passenger safety classes. They're not usually the best teachers. We always want to look for nurses that are eager to learn new things and who enjoy teaching parents and caregivers how to best protect their child. At Riley, for many years, I've had a waiting list of nurses, other healthcare professionals, police officers, firefighters, and people from the community wanting to make a difference in the lives of children and wanting to take the 4-day child passenger safety technician course at our hospital. Oftentimes, nurses want to be able to have the certification as a child passenger safety technician because they not only want to teach the basics of proper use of the car seat, but they also want to be able to go to the vehicle and teach parents how to install the car seat correctly. Before you get people to volunteer to be a child passenger safety technician, it is very important that the nurses know what is expected from them. Selecting the right participants for the course is going to help decrease your turnover rate. It's going to save time and money for the hospital. It's going to make a stronger team of child passenger safety technicians. And we need to remember that not everyone is cut out to be a child passenger safety technician, and that is okay also. There are several different types of training for child passenger safety. It's dependent on what training someone selects is based on the needs of the staff member and their role. The Basic Operation Kids Basic Awareness course is beneficial for anyone working with children on a regular basis. The national certification training is needed if the person will be teaching families how to install car seats at the vehicle, not just answering general questions. Most of the time, grants require that technicians teach installation at the vehicle, since most cars are not installed correctly when checked by a certified technician. If a technician is going to be working with children with special needs transportation due to their medical condition, it is important for them to attend one of the special needs transport and services. Certified child passenger safety technicians can use these free resources in the Safe Kids Worldwide Special Needs In-Service Toolkit that is available on the website to teach occupational therapists, physical therapists, and other hospital personnel how to safely transport children with special needs. If the technician will be responsible for completing a special needs evaluation, ordering the car seat or restraint device, and teaching the family how to use and install the large medical car seat or restraint, it is important that they complete the 2-day special needs enrichment course. The course is taught at various places throughout the United States by a special needs course instructor and combines lecture, hands-on training with large medical seats and restraints, restraint installation checkoffs, appointments with children with special transportation needs and their parents, and a written test. You can find offerings of this course at preventinjury.pediatrics.iu.edu at the Special Needs Transportation Center that's affiliated with the Automotive Safety Program and IU Health Riley Hospital. Once we get nurses and other child passenger safety technicians or healthcare providers trained to be child passenger safety technicians, we need to be concerned about maintaining, retaining, and supporting them. Most programs don't pay for people to be a certified technician. So paying them for their time to attend classes or conferences, pay for their registration fees and other expenses incurred, and to reimburse their technician recertification fees is important. Also, it's important to let them know of ways to easily complete their recertification requirements. Recertification is required every 2 years, and really there's a very minimal amount of requirements to recertify. An example of this is that the Auto Safety Program in Indiana provides refresher courses in different areas of the state, normally in the summer, where technicians can complete their CEUs and their installation checkoffs with an instructor all in one day while building relationships with other child passenger safety advocates. It makes it easy for them to recertify as a technician, and you will see that if you do something like this, your recertification rate will climb. So, ways to support nurses or other technicians. I like to arrange for technicians with more experience to mentor new technicians as they develop their skills and their competence level. This can be informal or a formal mentorship. Also, another idea is for the instructors that are child passenger safety technician instructors or coordinators of hospital-based programs can develop CEUs through Safe Kids that teach what they need, what their technicians need to know, how to take care of their patients or clients. An example of this could be trainings on car bed use for a hospital that uses a lot of car beds for babies and toddlers that can't sit in a semi-reclined position upon discharge from the hospital. They can also develop trainings on restraints that are available for children that are in hip spica cast due to surgery or broken femurs, so that they can be getting their CEUs at the same time getting the information needed to keep them competent and confident in their care of the patients that they serve. We need to encourage nurses to volunteer at events through the community where they will have more experienced technicians to support them as they gain experience and build relationships with other technicians. By building relationships with members of the team, nurses will feel supported and will want to continue their work to keep children safe when they travel. It is important not to pressure nurses to volunteer at community events if they simply don't have the time. They are still a valuable team member and can contribute by training families when they're at the hospital working. We also need to talk about recognition. Everyone likes to be recognized for the work they do. Some like to be acknowledged in a public forum, and others prefer a private setting. Receiving feedback from their manager, showing appreciation for the technician's accomplishments is extremely valuable. So the technician knows that their work is not going unnoticed. Recognizing nurses for their work in child passenger safety can be done in small ways, like a personalized handwritten thank you note, or in big ways, like nominating them for a national award or including them in interviews with the local media. Parents and caregivers showing their appreciation with a heartfelt thank you is an important way nurses are recognized for their efforts. Knowing children are significantly safer when they travel because of the teaching provided on the proper use of a car seat is the most rewarding gift of all. Nurses and other child passenger safety technicians have opportunities in all types of settings to teach parents how to properly transport their children. They are truly on the front lines of child passenger safety. It's important not only to recognize them for their hard work and going above and beyond the expected, to celebrating successes, which enable us to maintain a strong CPS program. Some ways we can celebrate include letting everyone know when we've reached program milestones, such as when a technician completes his or her 100th car seat check, or the program reaches 1,000, 5,000, or even 10,000 car seat checks. Some ways to celebrate include honoring the team members with balloons and a parade through the halls of the hospital, a thank you presentation from members of the hospital leadership or administration team, interviews on the success of the program on hospital social media platforms, and recognition of the program's achievements on local radio or news broadcasts. During National CPS Week, we have a great opportunity where we can recognize technicians with individualized thank you notes, letters to their nurse manager acknowledging their accomplishment. We can provide goodie bags, gift cards, technician t-shirts, thank you banners, articles about the child passenger safety program in the hospital, newsletter, and any other gestures of appreciation, I'm sure is appreciated by the technicians. It takes time to develop a culture where training parents how to safely transport their child is the expectation. It takes a strong foundation of support and nurses and other technicians on the front line every day, making a difference in the lives of children and the families they serve. This ends my part of the presentation. I'd like to thank you. Here's a picture of my two grandchildren that was taken at Christmas in 2019, and they're two of the biggest reasons I do what I do. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Shane Merritt with Merritt Manufacturing, president of Merritt Manufacturing, and I'm going to talk about is it okay to be big. So I'm doing the big part of this talk. And I'm going to start out with the NHTSA standard. So NHTSA is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And the reason I'm showing this is, some people talk about how far NHTSA regulates. What weight do they stop regulating? They actually don't stop regulating. They regulate to any weight. The trick is the biggest test dummy they use is a 10-year-old. And a 10-year-old weighs around 77 pounds. So think about 80 pounds. You probably hear that a lot. That NHTSA doesn't regulate anything or any car seat that takes children on that are over 80 pounds, or at least that portion of it. Well, they do, they just don't make you do any more than an 80-pound test dummy. I just stuck in here something that's going to be important later, didn't know where else to stick it. It's called the Seat Orientation Reference Line. And that'll become important when we talk about excursions. What I really want to say here before we get to the next slide is excursion is everything when it comes to being big. Okay, we're going to look at some other parameters that NHTSA talks about that There are safety parameters, and really it's all in excursion, and specifically it's in head excursion. Now, also in keeping with what NHTSA regulates, let's go down to the third or fourth bullet point. The second bullet point talks about the mass greater than 65 pounds. Let's go to the second bullet point, actually. A child restraint is recommended by its manufacturer in accordance with Section 5.5 for use either by children in a specified mass range that includes any children having a mass greater than 65 pounds, or by children in a specified height range. It's going to be greater than 1,250 millimeters. I don't know why they mix up the units there, but they do. That's going to use the T dummy, the Part 572 T dummy, and that is the Hybrid 3 10-year-old dummy. So that's where I'm letting you know that you're going to use that dummy to test the seat, and that's the biggest dummy you have to use. Doesn't mean we don't use bigger dummies. When we do it, a lot of times we're just looking for structural seats that are going to be structurally sound in a crash, not going to break apart. Then you go down to the fourth bullet point, D, and this D comes out of the standard. So this is just the standard sort of laid in here, some pieces of it. And it says each child restraint tested with a Part 572 Subpart S dummy, which we know is that 65-pounder. It's a 65-pounder. It's a 52-pound 6-year-old weighted up to 65 pounds. Need not meet 5.1.2 or 5.1.3. All right, so I'm going to show you in a moment what those are. Then it says in the last bullet point that the 10-year-old Hybrid 3 test dummy need not meet 5.1.2.1. All that is the HIC score. So when you're testing a car seat with your 10-year-old, which you have to do if you got it, if it's over 65 pounds, you do not have to have a good HIC score. Now, a good HIC score, a really good one's under 500. A bad HIC score is anything over 1,000. But according to the standard, you can ignore the HIC score with your Hybrid 3 10-year-old test dummy. So even though we're using an 80-pound or regulating at 80 pounds, using an 80-pound test dummy, we still aren't even looking at the HIC score according to NHTSA. I just wanted to point that out. Now, if you go back to the second to last bullet point, starting with D, so obviously the 5.1.2 is mentioned, and the 5.1.3. You're going to see on the next slide what those are, but I'll go ahead and tell you. The 5.1.2 is the HIC score and chest G. So when you're using the weighted 65-pound, it's the 52-pound 6-year-old weighted to 65, you don't have to look at chest G and you don't have to look at HIC. And then this 5.1.3 is excursions. You don't have to look at those either. So what I'm telling you there is a 65-pounder that's a 6-year-old weighted up to that is really just a structural test. Okay. So the last dummy you use in doing any crash testing that you actually have to, according to NHTSA, get some instrumentation on for the HIC is a 6-year-old. Now you do have to check chest G on the 10-year-old, but the 6-year-old is the last dummy where you have to do everything, and that's the non-weighted normal 52-pound test dummy. And this is just showing you what those requirements were. This is injury criteria, the first bullet point. You've got accelerometers in the head, which read HIC, and that's A. And then down here in the next, in D down here in this last bullet point, we're talking about chest G. Neither one of those are required with the weighted 65-pounder, and only the chest G is required with the 10-year-old. And the next section is excursion. Now these are required with the 10-year-old. And these cover knee excursion and head excursion. There's a little bit of, people sometimes get confused about head excursion. If you've seen the targets on the side of the dummy's heads, a lot of people think that we're measuring where the center of those targets go, how far out they go, right? That's not actually true. You're actually measuring to the leading edge of the head. That leading edge will change. It might start out at close on the forehead, then it gets higher. But it's wherever the leading edge of the head is, whatever part of the head, top of the head that might be, in the worst part of the forward part of the crash, not the target on the side of the head. The target on the side of the head is when you're rear facing and you're making sure the test dummy that target doesn't come above the top of the seat. That's that's there to measure. Now, I stuck this in here because this is a table out of the standard. And look at this first row. Harnesses, backless booster seats, and restraints designed for use by physically handicapped children. A lot of people don't realize this, but if you read this last column, it says attached with lap belt. In addition, if a tether is provided, it is attached. We actually are allowed to only test, we only have to test when a tether is attached as well. In other words, other car seats have to attach with no tether. So in other words, let's find all other restraints right here. I hope you can see my arrow. It's 1, 2, about 4th, 5th column down, attached with lap belt. Oh, that's no tethers attached. Yep, that's it. All right, now notice the head excursion is 813 millimeters here. That is 32 inches. If you go back up to where we get to have our tether attached, we're still at 32 inches. If you come down, right on down, second from the bottom, you'll see a head excursion here with a tether attached on just a able-bodied car seat. That is 27.4 inches or 720 millimeters. So we're actually pretty lucky we get to only pass this. And I'll tell you, in the real world, we're passing this, okay, down here. I'm not sure why they give us this leniency here. Now, it is important that they allow us not to have to pass a lap belt only test. And remember, this whole talk is about excursion, because that's where, if you're big, you're going to run into a problem, if you're going to run into a problem. And I'm going to get to that in the next slides. But we are allowed to use a tether, so we have to tell our people, since we don't test without a tether, we have to tell them, you have to use a tether or some other way, like with the drive seat and with our seat, and I think maybe the special tomato, we used a shoulder belt to help hold the top of the seat back. And that's another way to do it. And then we have to pass this. It's okay to do that, but you need to make sure you're passing the 32-inch without a tether. So that means you have to use a tether in all cases, but it does mean if you're going to use a belt path that doesn't augment and help you tether, you better use one. Now, how do we define safe? I just want to back up a bit and define safe. We talked about a Hicks score, stands for head injury criteria. Measures accelerations on all 3 axes, and the head, it's significant acceleration that can cause damage. Think of shaken baby syndrome. So other than a chin strike, this acceleration really doesn't, end in a contact. It's just forward, back, forward. The higher the score, the greater the acceleration. Values above 1,000 are unacceptable. When you're getting this high score, it's also looking at the time period, right? Acceleration is velocity over time. So it's how quickly, acceleration is how quickly velocity is changing. Chest G are the very same thing, but we're talking about in the chest. And values over 60 are unacceptable. The 1,000 is a unitless score. The 60 is actually G's. So when we talk about head excursion now, the limit's 32 inches, lap belt only. Not sure where that 36, that's a knee excursion, that 36. Not sure why it's sitting there. Might be the 27.4 is when tested with a lap belt only and tether attached. And then there's the knee excursion, 36 inches when tested in any configuration. Doesn't matter whether they have a tether or not. For this discussion, we're interested in head excursion. Reason is head injury is generally far more serious to long-term prognosis than lower extremity injury. Mitigation for knee excursion is not as obvious, what you can do about it. But generally, we don't lose knee excursion as dummies get bigger. Now I've put up just a real quick diagram. I don't have to worry about a lot of it. I just want to make clear where we're getting these excursions from. Hopefully you can see my arrow. There's like 4 circles. There's 2 a little higher, 1 kind of to the left and lower, and then there's this other circle. That is the SORL, is the seat orientation reference line. It's just where everything's measured from. It's the head, which is here at 813 millimeters, and the knees, 915. That's if I recall, that's a lap belt only head excursion, and then the knees are for either lap belt or with tether. But that's where you're measuring from. And then this line, this vertical line way off to the right, where you just imagine the head going out towards it, and you surely cannot have the leading edge of the head break that line, right? Now, of course, they've drawn to the same line here, both these measurements. They can't both be the same thing. The knees would be further out. And then there would be a target on the side of the knee, just so you know, and that would be that target, not the leading edge of the knee, but that target that couldn't break the line. So the only reason I put this up here is let you see this and how this worked and how you got excursions, because excursion is really what it's all about whether or not it's okay to be big. As body weight and height increase, Hicks scores improve, actually. So that's just something you need to think about. When we're doing crash testing, there's nothing worse. They call it the Krabby. It's the 1-year-old test dummy. And that dummy is crabby. That dummy likes to get high HIC scores. That is our biggest concern in crash testing. Think about it. He's never going to fail on excursion of any kind. His knees aren't going to go nearly far out. His head's not going to go way out. You got to worry about chest G a little bit. That could be a problem, but HIC is really where you struggle. HIC improves as people grow because muscles in the neck strengthen, and these test dummies, well, they make them like people, right? So they strengthen the dummies as they get bigger. Now, interestingly, kids with special needs, not so much, right? We don't have any crash test dummies for kids with special needs, and they're going to have some weaker muscles, and their spines could be stretched more, and their necks won't be as strong, and so that doesn't necessarily hold out for them. And that's why we as a company always tell people, hey, rear face, rear face. We'd rather you rear face than buy our seat. Rear facing is the absolute best thing to do for as long as possible, particularly for kids with special needs. Also, as a kid grows, the head becomes a little more proportional to the body. And you know what I mean by that is the head's not so big in proportion to the body. It's a little smaller, and that helps you on excursions. Chest G's generally decrease also with body weight and height going up, but not as dramatically as the HIC scores. As body weight and height increase, head and knee excursion, it's pretty obvious, I think, also increase. This is the crux of the problem for bigger occupants. So when we're crash testing stuff, as we get to the bigger test dummies, like a 3-year-old, he's pretty cool because his HIC's gotten better, but we're not worrying about excursions yet. So he's like the Goldilocks sweet spot. The 6-year-old, that's when you start getting into this excursion problem, but you're getting a lot better on HICs. And chest G's are kind of staying the same as the 3-year-old. And so obviously as you get older and older, excursions are going to get worse and worse. They just have to. You might gain a little bit, your neck really doesn't help you. It helps you with the HIC problem, but it doesn't really help you with excursion. You're still going when that crash happens. So this is just some real primitive artwork here. Larger occupants head excursion. Head excursion increases two things you want to think about. Center of gravity of the body overall, and that's what that line is, the CG. As that goes up, your car seat's going to want to rotate a bit more. And what we're really talking about here, right, is a non-tethered car seat. So that car seat's going to rotate some more, and then there's a primitive harness going between the body and the neck, and there's another measurement arrow. So that's from harness to top of head. That's another thing you got to think about because that's whipping forward, right? So just look at the smaller kid on the left, the bigger kid on the right. We're going to have more excursion on the right because of a higher center of gravity and more length from neck to top of head above the harness. Think about a hinge. Think about a moment arm. You know, everybody knows when you shut a door, the easiest way to do it is towards the far end away from the hinge. And that's what's starting to happen here. As you get to this thing on the right, we're getting further from the hinge. It's getting a lot easier to throw that excursion out there, to push that kid forward like you would a door. Okay, so I listed some special needs restraints for occupants weighing more than 80 pounds. So what I want to talk about is tethering is what you got to do. And that could be a tether in quotes, right? You could, let's look at the first one, the drive spirit. It uses the shoulder belt as a tether. So that it kind of in quotes as a tether. Well, that's doing the job. That's stopping the excursion. And why is excursion a problem? So when we talk about HIC, we're really talking about the shaken baby. You're not contacting anything except in these rare instances of a chin strike, which can really drive up your HIC. But when we're worried, why are we worried about excursion? Why do we care how far a kid goes or an occupant goes? And that's because we don't want them to strike the seat in front. If they strike the seat in front, we've got a problem now. That's contact, and those HICs are always even higher than the non-contact HIC. So this is preventing a strike, and so anything to stop that seat from going forward is going to help. The shoulder belt is a tether for the drive spirit. You got the 2500, we use a heavy-duty tether mount. There's nothing wrong with that. That's going to, obviously, it's a legitimate tether. Then you've got the belt positioning boosters, the Carrot, the Monza. I mean, these will go to any weight, right? You could get really big in there. The seat plus the occupant just doesn't need to weigh more than the seat belt can stand, and obviously that goes really high. The Pilot's another one. If you skip the Roosevelt, you see the Churchill and Chamberlain. These are all belt positionings. The Chamberlain's not technically a belt positioning booster, but it's more of a positioning device. That was a typo. Easy on Products also makes use of the heavy-duty tether mount, and I'm not sure about the Wallaroo. It used to be the Traveler Plus, and it used to use the same shoulder belt as tether that we and Drive use, and perhaps a special tomato. But any of these things are fine. The whole point is to make sure, if you're big, you're tethering your seat. Now, what if you're sitting, where are you sitting in the car? You might be sitting in the back seat, hopefully. That's where we want you. In real world, you might not be able to. You might be sitting in the front seat. If you're in the front seat, we don't see that as an issue, other than the fact you should be in the back. You can still put the seat back. It's not going to be as safe as the back seat. But if you put the seat back and say you're in a belt positioning booster, which is the most likely thing you're going to be in if you're in the front seat, we think you're in good shape. When we say belt positioning booster, I'm still thinking about special needs. I'm thinking about these larger boosters. And if you keep the child back and they're not leaning forward and they're heavy enough for the vehicle manufacturer's recommendation for airbags, then we recommend don't turn the airbag off. Sometimes I see people turning off airbags that they don't need to turn off. Just because you have a child in a front seat does not automatically mean you turn the airbag off. You remember, the worst case for airbags is rear facing. The next worst case is a kid in a booster that's leaning forward, messing with the radio because he's getting impact with the airbag early in the airbag deployment. That's a problem. But actually, an airbag is helpful if a child who weighs enough, according to the vehicle manufacturer, who may be in a booster, maybe not, is positioned properly and has their head back. That will actually help them and be more advantageous than turning it off. So we do promote that. And this talks about programs. This is one of the things about tethers that is a little bit of a problem. We're compelled to follow vehicle and car seat manufacturer instructions. This is never any fun for anybody, because the car seat manufacturers or the vehicle manufacturers don't always think about us. We don't always think about them. This makes real-world transportation problems very difficult to solve. Special needs child restraint manufacturers will state the maximum occupant weight for use of a single tether. And then typically the vehicle manufacturer will set a limit for the vehicle's tether anchor, and you probably find this in the latch manual. Both entities are taking the vehicle's tether anchor strength into account. What I mean by that is we're not worried about our equipment. None of these other car seat manufacturers are worried about their tethers. They're going to hold. We make them to hold generally about 3,800 pounds. So they can actually hold up the Honda Odyssey with the SO and with the webbing. I think the web braking strength is about 4,000. The problem is we're all worried about the anchors. And we think the vehicle anchors, we have different ideas than the vehicle manufacturers. Obviously, their ideas trump ours to some degree. And I'd certainly admit that if they say it breaks at this, then I'm going to agree it breaks at that. But some of us believe it's just better to tether in some situations, even if you're above that. So we go to 80 pounds on the Roosevelt for the occupant weight, and we say tether up to 80 for one tether. If you want to use two, that's fine. But we just don't want people not to tether because we've said less than 80. So that's kind of some room for debate and discussion. The latch manual reveals there are some discrepancies between the vehicle manufacturers and car seat manufacturers. This does create stress and confusion for CPS professionals, along with all the other stress and confusion, or mainly stress, they have to deal with. So bottom line on keeping large occupants safe, it's certainly okay to be big as long as you use one of the following. I also want to mention one other thing is you're growing and getting bigger in the back seat or the front seat. Back seat's better. Side impact airbags work better. I mean, the bigger you get, the better your position next to them. We actually don't have any field data that side impact airbags are bad for any occupant, but we know you're fitting them better when you're getting bigger. So if you're in the back seat, you're getting bigger, you have a tether, you're in a belt positioning booster, all these things are great. Being big is fantastic. You can do a 5-point restraint with tether attached. Per manufacturer instructions, this may include tethering to a seat belt or heavy-duty tether anchor, 5-point restraint with method for using the shoulder belt to tether that we talked about, and a belt positioning booster seat. When faced with a tethering dilemma, it's always better to tether, we think, than not to tether. And that is my presentation, and I just wanted to mention two things before I give it away. I know there was some mention in the first talk about car beds, and there's always debate about car beds. We do have two of the car beds. We have the Hope car bed and the Angel Ride. We purchased the Angel Ride a couple of years ago. When we first purchased it, it was kind of tough to get it going. There was lots of sourcing to do, and it did take some time to get it out. They're readily available now. We had a concern about a harness, or 216. I was actually doing a quality inspection after the fact, so one quality inspection had already been done. But I noticed on the buckle there was a sew, and there was one in-house that was not sewn correctly. Difficult to explain, but if you just imagine turning a piece of webbing back on itself and you have a 4-row sew, you want all 4 rows on there. Remember, a 4-row sew will handle 3,000 pounds, 3,400. A car bed doesn't need 3,400 pounds. I found one that only had 3 of the sews attached. That was not inherently a danger, right? Three rows is fine. Bad form, you don't want to send anything out like that, but it was fine. We opted to do a recall because we couldn't be sure. Somebody who knew was on that line, and we only had 216, I think, seats that were sold at that time after we'd taken over. I thought, just recall them. Well, at this point, we've got 197 of those harnesses back. So there's only 19 still out there. None of the ones that came back have an issue. So it appears to have been an aberration. That's what you want to do in a recall, though. You just want to make sure that you don't have something. So I have no concerns about the harness. And as far as getting seats made now, we have those under control. So there are plenty of angel rides to go around. We've solved all of the sourcing problems for the fabric. And as far as car beds and whether or not, what's safer, a rear-facing restraint or a car bed, I would always go for a rear-facing restraint, just because in general, when it comes even to a Roosevelt, right? I believe rear-facing is better than forward-facing. I believe 5 points better than, booster seats. But we just know those things, right? We know those are better. And so we always want to graduate late. And when it comes to car beds, I believe car beds are safe. I believe 20 years of the angel ride being out there, it's proven itself safe. 10 years of the Hope car bed, and Costco's got one that's been out there, might be longer than any of those, been there a long time. So I do believe they're safe. But I still think it's better. I mean, for instance, the Hope car bed takes up 2 seating positions. So there's a reason why you want to avoid doing it if you can. The other thing is, let's say you get an angel ride. Are the parents going to get them out soon enough, right? I mean, it only goes to 9 pounds if you're lucky. And do you have to deal with the misuse of them not transferring them into another seat soon enough? So there are reasons, and I think it's just good form in general, even with car seats that are like other car seats, to try to stick with mainstream car seats. I think that's a good thing to do, but I do stand by the fact that our car seats our car beds are just as safe as the other car seats. Pick values that I've gotten on the Hope car bed are around 100, which is really incredible pick value. Chest G's are in the 30s. So I do think we have excellent products. Our products are safe. I think everyone's car beds are just as safe. They've got a lot of time out there in the field that have proven that to me anyway. And I do appreciate the time, and I hope next Lifesavers, everybody will be greeting each other and the pandemic will be over. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, speakers, for an excellent overview and presentation of some really tough topics. I always learn something whenever I hear every single one of you speak. And so I think our audience would like to hear your final thoughts. What is your take-home message from today? Dr. Davis, would you like to start?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Bull, and thanks to everyone. This has been really informative. I guess my takeaway would be to emphasize for small infants to really try to be informed and educated about the appropriate device for discharge in this patient population, and make sure that you're choosing the correct device. It's important to know minimum size and minimum weights that are appropriate for car seats or car beds. And it's important to know that regardless of the device you choose for the infant, really performing a period of observation, whether it's a car seat tolerance screen or a similar car bed tolerance screen, observing a patient in the car bed is important to assess for safe breathing. And to emphasize, as Shane eloquently stated in his presentation, the car beds that are on the market do absolutely meet federal safety standards and are appropriate for travel, and they're the right device for certain patients that have medical issues. However, if an infant can be safely transferred home and safely positioned in a rear-facing car seat, that's ideal for us. So really being informed about what's out there and helping to educate families and making the right choice for your patients, but being sure to observe them in either device before they go home.
Thank you. Michelle Chapello.
Yes, in conclusion, I would just like to thank everyone for attending. I would like to just say that, as you see, there are lots of facets to developing a child passenger safety program, and I just can't stress enough the importance of having policies that outline what your program consists of. You want to make sure that you check the policies for accuracy based on NHTSA and the AAP standards, especially if you choose to use a commercially available policy or teaching sheets for your families that are available through vendors. You must check to make sure that they're accurate based on best practice standards. And if you have any questions as you're developing your program and your policies, feel free to reach out to me if you feel the need. Thanks.
Great. And Shane Merritt, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for the presentations, the fellow speakers, and Marilyn for you inviting us to do this. It's quite an honor to do it and to be a part of it. And when it comes to the subject matter, especially the tethers and the discrepancies between what vehicle manufacturers say and the car seat manufacturers, anybody ever in a situation of any kind, they're welcome to call here at Merit Manufacturing and we'll help. We like to solve problems by talking about all of your options, not just the ones we offer. We think if we can solve your problem, that's the best for everybody and the best for us in the long term. And we also often give preventinjury.org's website out so that people can get an absolutely non-biased and professional read of what they're going through and what might be the best thing for them. So I appreciate it. Thanks again for everyone being a part of this and for asking me to do it. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you, and see you at Lifesavers 2021.